Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the painting studio, and this will be the beginning of a new series to paint this 6-inch preening Drake Mallard. And we got the bird carved. If you haven't seen that series, there's a 4-part series on how I carved this bird that might be helpful. Today, we're going to start painting the bird, and we'll start with some base coating. I also want to do some combing of the vermiculation. So we'll go through that. Everything on a pretty small scale here, but should be fun. If you're enjoying my channel and getting some value out of it, please hit the subscribe button. That does help me. It's free, but it's a good show of support for the channel if it is being helpful to you in your carving. The goal of this channel is to inspire people to maybe give carving a try, and it's been a lot of fun for me. I just wanted to share that with as many people as I could. All right, let's get started with some base coating on this Drake Mallard. All right, we'll start off with some base coating, and this base coat material is a little like toothpaste consistency. It's a mixture of maybe 50% Liquitex heavy body acrylic. I use burnt umber and 50% Liquitex gesso. Mix those together and it gives us this kind of neutral gray-brown value. And then I'm going to paint that on the bird, but then use synthetic sponge, just cheap packing sponge, to put just a little bit of texture on that surface. We'll keep the bill nice and smooth, but texture the other areas of the bird, and that'll lend itself to some of the painting techniques that I'll be demonstrating as we go forward. Just a note, there's some pretty close tolerances here, so I've got a small piece of sponge that I've clipped off, and I'll use that to get a little bit of texture under the bill there. So you can vary the size and shapes of these sponges to do what you need to do. I'm going to start with just coating the bill. And this is pretty thick, so I've used a little bit of water to thin this down just slightly for this smooth coat on the bill, so that I don't have any significant brush strokes left in that area. And then I'll use the mixture full strength for the textured areas. Okay, I've got the bill pretty well done. Now I'm just going to, I carved in the eyes on this bird, by the way, so I'm going to keep those smooth as well, but I'm going to texture right over first, and then I'll come back and smooth out the paint on the eyes after the fact. So I'm just putting a little paint on the bird, and again, this is taking a little longer than normal because of the neck position here is very tight to the body, so that provides some additional challenge. I don't want to leave any ridges in the paint. Okay, now I'm going to put a little bit of paint on the palette. Get a piece of my sponge, really dab the paint, work the paint into the sponge. And then I'm going to hit the feathered areas of the bird and give it a little bit of texture. You can see I'm avoiding the bill there. I like this texture. It gives us a little bit of a texture difference between the bill and the feathered areas of the bird. You don't have to use texture. You could just paint this smooth as well, and the techniques will still work. Now I'm going to use this smaller sponge, get some material on it, and use this to work in under the bill and try not to get texture on that bill. But having that point lets me get around some of these tighter areas, add some texture, leave the bill alone. So I'll get the bird textured and then I'll be back. Got a little water on the brush. I'm just going back over the eyes and removing the texture so they're nice and slick. For texturing the body, I've just moved to a little larger piece of sponge so I could cover more surface area quickly. And this texture I'm talking about is very fine. You can see, you can barely see it. I prefer a nice fine texture, not a super rough sandpaper-like texture. That's just my preference. Especially for a delicate miniature like this, we don't need a real rough surface. So I'll go over this. The more you go over it, the more you knock down the texture and it becomes refined. And I want consistent texture throughout the bird. Just a close-up view of the texture. I'll let that dry and then we'll comb on the vermiculation. Okay, I've done a little layout work so that we can identify the areas that need vermiculation. So I've got the big tertials mapped out here, and the scapulars come back to about this level. So we're going to vermiculate all of this area, not the cape and the side pocket areas. And then I've penciled in where this black rump area stops. This will be vermiculated, this will, and the scapulars. I've got the breast penciled in, the neck ring. That neck ring is actually separated in back. It's not a complete circle on a Drake Mallard. So with his head stretched around like that, that separation, I'm going to say, is going to move slightly in this direction, but it's still going to be there. So I'm going to pull that white ring about to there, like that. And then I penciled in the white tail. It's going to come up right to that point. So let's get our combing material. As far as combs, I have an old comb. This is the finest comb I've seen in terms of the number of teeth per inch. There's about 20 teeth per inch. This is a 1/2 inch comb and it's got 10 teeth in that 1/2 inch dimension widthwise. So that's going to make a nice fine vermiculation for this 6-inch bird. All right, I'm going to start back here and then work forward. I've got a little 3/4 inch wide angled brush. We're not going to need a lot of material, since the comb is so fine, but we need enough to leave a mark. I'll start with this area. I'm just loading some paint in the area. And since the side pocket is also going to be vermiculated, I'm just going to add some paint in that area as well. This will wrap underneath. So let's see how that's going to do. I've got my comb. I'm going to make sure it's nice and clean. I'll start up here. Just zig and zag. I'm lacking a little material there, so I'm going to load a little in my comb. Take this on around underneath. Need a little more material right in there. That's the challenge in combing, is having enough material but not too much that it looks sloppy. I'm going to clean my comb again, wipe it off on paper towel. Go back at it here. That looks pretty good. Wiping off. Back to the top of the side pocket. And I want that combing to start wrapping around, following the shape of the side pocket here. This combing can go down in this direction. You've got to work relatively fast because you don't want the material drying. I'm missing a little material in the middle, which I mentioned is part of the challenge. Clean my comb again, and I do that by dipping it in water. Head back in this direction. And that looks better. Taking material off the comb again. Too much water. That won't work. I'm not going to try to get too detailed in the combing here. It's tight enough the way it is. You have a little better view of that area in the light. Now let's keep working up the side pocket. Add more material here. Make sure you have enough material at the top of the side pocket so there's good clear combing right up to the edge of the side pocket there. And then I'm going to take it right up to here. Keep this relatively thin as we approach the breast there, so there's not a huge ridge. Okay. Clean the comb by dipping it in water, pulling it off on paper towel. This is very small, so I hope you can see some of this in the video. Just kind of zigging and zagging back and forth. That was a good pass there. back up to the top. Again, I'm kind of following a rounded shape here and then back out. I'm not trying to do individual feathers here. This is meant to be more of a gunning style paint job. So just hitting with each pass. Pretty meticulous work here. As we approach the breast, then I want to start angling these around and out into the breast feathers and lining that vermiculation up the way it would be on the live bird. Okay, give you a view of that. That looks pretty clean. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to dry this first so that as I work on the other side, I don't run the risk of damaging that combing that I've already done. So I'll dry this. Then I'll do this side pocket area, dry that. Then we can do the scapulars, and I'll be back. I wanted to show this before I move to the other side because I think it's helpful to point out. I had a little too much water in the mix in that area, and you can see after I dried it, it's a little bit flat in that area. Not a problem. Just make sure it's nice and dry, come back, add a little material just in that area and comb back through it to give us good clean definition on the combing in that area that washed out a little bit. Just a quick look at the combing on that side pocket, and I wrap that underneath to join up with that other side. I'll dry that and then we'll get to the scapulars. I just wanted to show I went back to that washed out spot and made sure this undercoat was dry first, and then just put a little additional material on there, comb through it, and that's going to look a lot better. For the scapulars here, I'm going to do 1/2 at a time because I don't want the material to dry out on me. If it starts to dry, it's going to start to tear and pull and really become messy, and we don't want that. So I'm going to load material right back to the rear edge of the scapulars there. And the cape does not need to be vermiculated. So I'm going to go right up to the cape, and on this side, right to the center line. I'm using the tip of the brush to kind of move material where I want it. It doesn't have to look pretty right now. We just need enough material on there to do the job. I think I've got enough on there. I'm going to wet the comb, wipe it off, start back here. Make sure I'm in screen. Just going to kind of follow the tips of the scapulars here around the corner and pull it off in that direction, and I can remove that material so I don't have to deal with it later. Take another pass. I'm going a complete pass across the back, pull it off. So important to keep your comb clean, because especially with a very fine comb like this, if I don't get the material out of there, it's not going to pull clean lines. I don't have quite enough material right here, I can tell that, so I'm just loading some in there. So I've got enough to start the pass. I want to go right up to my side pocket, do a little bit of an arc shape. I'm going to go back and clean that up a little bit. And I still had water in the comb. That's a problem we've already seen, so I need to make sure I get that out of there. And that deposited water right here. So I'm going to add a little more material to give us a little more body in the material so that water doesn't create a problem. Hopefully. Another thing you can do is kind of preload the comb if you don't have quite enough on the edge, like I just did there. And then you've got enough material to start a nice clean pass. Right up to the edge here. Things are getting pretty tight here, especially with that head in that position. So I just gotta do the best I can do. I'll flip this around and maybe go at it from this direction. You can see I tried to unload the comb. It's still full of material. Right now I want a clean comb. No water on the comb, and just finish the job here as we go up into the cape. I'm going back over this area because I didn't like the way it looked. That looks pretty good. I need to go right along the edge here. Pretty tough clearances here on a small bird. That looks pretty good. I think I'm going with that. And now I'll do this, I'll dry that. The other thing I'm going to do, get a little dry brush and remove these lumps and bumps in the cape and just kind of blend that material in so there's a soft transition there and not a bunch of hard material to deal with later. Same thing here. Okay, I'll dry that, do the other side. Won't make you suffer through that, and then I'll come back. Okay, I got the scapulars done. Just give you a quick view of that combing. And I'm going to let that dry thoroughly, because if we don't, you start painting base coats over that, you run the risk of losing definition in the combing, and we don't want to do that. So especially as fine as this is, I'm going to let that dry, go have some lunch, and then I'll be back. Okay, now we can start blocking in the base colors, and I've mixed up a light gray. That's about 75% white gesso with 20% raw umber added, and then maybe 5% raw sienna to warm that up a bit, and then just a touch of carbon black to make sure it's on the gray side and not just on the brown side. And I'm using a little angle brush and just painting right over the combed areas. And this will probably take a couple of coats. So I'm going to include the tertials in that gray color, and this right up to the breast. And as I approach these areas where there's going to be a color transition, I don't want to leave a big heavy line of paint. Kind of goes without saying, but if you're not used to painting, you might not think of that, because we want a nice soft blend there between colors. And I don't want to have to fight with a ridge of paint that's going to be impossible to hide later. So I'll go ahead and give this a couple of coats. Actually, it's covering pretty well with a single coat, but I'll just make sure I've got good coverage. I'm going to do the scapulars as well, as I mentioned, right back to the, and including the tertials here. You know, I'm going to go ahead and paint this speculum and wing, forward wing area, the gray value right now. It'll make it easier to change to some different colors later with this lighter gray base underneath. Okay, I'll get that done, come back. While I have the gray out, I want to take a little white gesso, mix it with the gray. Not much paint on the brush. Use a little angle brush here, and I want to lighten this area on this side of the rump to give us that characteristic little lighter white marking before we get to the carbon black rump. And this gray is still a little bit wet, so that helps facilitate blending. So I want it to be light on the edge and then fade into the gray going forward. So it's not a hard stripe. It's kind of a soft highlight there. Take that clear around. And I'm just kind of scrubbing back and forth, and then adding a little more white to build up the color so it's a little brighter right on the edge here. And I can use the point of this angled brush to kind of control where I'm depositing that light value. Like that. Okay, for the breast, I'm mixing up primarily brown earth. I want to darken that a bit with burnt umber, and then add a little burgundy to that mix so we get that reddish tint to the mallard's breast. And this will definitely take a few coats, but that gives us a nice rich reddish brown for the breast. And once again, as I get close to the side here, the side pocket gray, I'm going to lighten up the pressure on the brush so that I don't leave a big line there of paint. I'll get this painted and come back. For the cape, I've mixed about 90% raw umber with a little bit of raw sienna and a touch of Nimbus gray to lighten it up a bit. And I'm going to go in here with a little angle brush and just paint in the cape area, a little bit of a soft transition between the cape and this surrounding area. I'm going to pull that cape color down into the breast color. I've got some blending to do here underneath the bill. Pretty tight quarters. Right now I'm just kind of scrubbing on color so I keep it soft. I'm also going to pull a little bit of that color down the center of the back. And then I want a little soft transition between the gray and the cape color. So I'm going to scrub that in. This will take multiple coats to build up this color. And I've pulled the breast color back around the corner here, and I just want to fade that into this cape color. Doing a little bit of scrubbing under the bill there to pull that cape color down into this area. Kind of transitions into the breast on each side. There's a lot of variation from bird to bird in that regard, but a lot of the reference I'm looking at, that cape color pulls a little bit into the side of the breast color here. So I'll keep working on that and keep working on getting a soft transition into the gray on these cape edges. Now I washed out my brush and I've just got some clear water in this same brush, and I'm going to use that to scrub along the margin here and promote a little bit of a blend between the two colors and make that a little softer than just the dry brush blend. Kind of a damp brush blend. For the primary base color, I've got burnt umber mixed with just a little bit of Nimbus gray. Give this brown gray color. And we want that to be fairly dark. So I'll block those in. This will take a couple of coats. And I'm going to include this area down below that tucks behind the speculum and the tertials and rides into the side pocket here. I'll get a couple of coats on those. Now I've mixed up some off-white with white gesso and a touch of raw umber. I'm going to paint in the upper part of the tail feathers here. This will take multiple coats, probably 3 coats to get good coverage. And then I'm also going to use that off-white to paint the neck stripe. So I'll get those blocked in and then come back. I'm going to paint the edge of this tail white as well. I didn't like the way that brush was kind of scrubbing off paint, so I switched to a softer round brush as I put these additional coats on the tail, and that's doing a better job of laying some paint on smoothly. For the underside of the tail, I've got a little Nimbus gray mixed with that off-white just to give us a little darker value under here, and I'll paint that on. It'll take a couple of coats. Back to the off-white color now, and I'm going to go paint in the neck stripe. That head is pulled in this direction, so the original connection of the neck is back here. And there's a gap in this white ring. In a head forward position, the gap is directly behind the neck. But in this head pulled preening position, it's going to change the location of the neck stripe a bit. We still want a gap back here. We probably still want it reasonably behind the head or the back of the neck. So I'm just kind of figuring where that gap should be. Kind of hard to see, I realize. I'll play around with that a little bit, and this will take a couple of coats. And again, I'm trying not to build up a big line of paint in this white stripe because I want to come back and add details, some feather barbs to break it up a bit. So I want to keep it nice and soft. So I'll get that loaded on here, a couple of coats, and then come back. Now I've got just carbon black on the detail brush. I'm going to go right up to this lighter stripe. Paint in this rump area. The tail coverts here. The tail curl. And under the rump. I'm also going to paint these supports under the primaries carbon black just to make them kind of fade in to the surrounding area. We want that to disappear as much as possible, but they're there for strength. Just a note here, while I have black in the detail brush, I'm just going down this line, putting some feather barbs into the lighter white stripe area to soften that and break it up a bit. Just a quick picture of the rump area that I painted carbon black. And now for the head, I'm using a base color of phthalo green mixed with carbon black, probably 50-50, just so I can barely see a bit of a green tint. It's primarily dark to give us the base for the iridescence that we want to paint on later. I'm going to paint right over the eye at this point. This will take a couple of coats to get good coverage. And I'm not going to try to detail right now the feather barbs in that neck stripe. I'm just going to get close to it and block in these colors to begin with. And then we'll come back and add details later in the next session. So I'll get this head painted a couple of coats. Starting to look like a mallard. I'm going to wait to paint the bill until later, I think. We'll see. Since it's pretty protected, maybe I could go ahead and paint the bill a base color at this point. Normally I leave that until last because if the bill is out here, it takes some wear and tear during the painting process. So I like to just finish with the bill normally. For the base coat on the bill, I've got a mix of 50-50 yellow oxide and raw sienna just to get a base color applied. I'm using a detail brush, and this will take probably 2 or 3 coats. Yellows notoriously are tough to cover. They don't have a lot of hiding power, so from my experience, it takes more coats with these yellows to get them to brighten up a bit and hide what's underneath. So I'll get that done, and then we'll be done with our base coating. All right, just a quick 360 view of the base coated bird, just so you can see all of the areas that have been coated so far. And next time we'll add in the details. Okay, that's a good place to stop for today. We did a lot of work. We've got the bird, the base colors laid in. Next time we'll work on some of the fun stuff, adding the details and really making the bird come alive. Until then, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you. Hope you're enjoying your carving.